Hello out there. How you guys doing? I'm Matt from Foulball Productions, and this is
And I'm Jared.
This is Jared, and this is another
You
episode
paused.
of. Oh,
I didn't know if that was a cue.
For effect, it's okay. It's another episode of Film Talk with Matt and Jared. Our sixth episode, even though above me it says episode 1. The branding is dated, and I didn't have time to change it because I didn't realize until right before we went on the air. But here we are. Hi, Jared.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, my friend. Anytime. Happy to have you. Jared is a filmmaker. We both live in the Los Angeles area. I'm an actor. So I guess we come at it with a little bit of business expertise, if you will. We've been around it for a long time. Jared's made a few films, just made a feature that I helped out with. And yeah, whatever. I mean, who cares? We're going to have a conversation.
They want the hot takes.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, well, I guess what have you been watching? You been checking out anything interesting recently?
Yeah, I've been watching a lot. Over the last couple of days, the predominant media I've been consuming is Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights. I'm listening to it on audiobook.
Was it you that were telling me about all the interesting interviews? Like, I think the last time we talked, right?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I'd seen a lot of interviews with him, but I hadn't consumed the book yet. I'm a little over halfway through it. It's an audiobook, so it's harder to tell, I guess, exactly where you are, but over half of the length of the book. It's phenomenally entertaining. He's an excellent storyteller, and a lot of the stories that he has to tell are more interesting than a lot of his movies. So if anybody's interested,
burn McConaughey.
No, I mean, I like a lot of his movies, but he had a very, very interesting upbringing and a lot of interesting perspectives to tell. So, definitely worth it. But that's been consuming a lot of my time recently.
His career is fascinating. Like, from him, coming in like pretty hot and then being relegated essentially to just like stupid rom-coms and like no one took him seriously. They're just
right.
Like, you know what I mean? It was just this joke of a guy, and then has like one of the most impactful and interesting renaissances like maybe ever.
Yeah, one of the cues that I feel like I'm picking up on with him is that he has a slight resentment for the idea of like the McConaissance and for rebranding himself because he sees it as a single trajectory. Just as an actor who's trying to do exactly what he's trying to do, and maybe didn't always get the roles that he wanted or the parts he felt he was capable of, but that he doesn't see it as a reinvention. I think maybe just something took, because one of his second major feature film, or maybe third, was Contact, which is a fairly serious role. And like a little bit of a heavier performance than like the rom-coms you really kind of got latched onto for a while. So I guess he feels, and I can kind of empathize with, that he's always been doing that sort of work. It's just been appreciated as of late.
You know what? Fuck him. He was in The Wedding Planner, yes. Failure to Launch, Fool's Gold, Ghost of Girlfriend's Past, all these in like inside of like 5 years. Sorry if like you pick all these terrible movies at the same time and then we have like an impression of who you are.
That's fair enough.
What am I supposed to do? Not use my deductive reasoning because it makes you feel bad? Like, no, dude, like you were the rom-com guy. It is what it is. Like, this is a compliment, if anything.
Yeah, he can be real 50-50. I checked out his I don't know if it's his most recent work, but Serenity, that sci-fi movie he did maybe a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit over. It's this little like Twilight Zone-y type flick. It's got kind of a sci-fi bend to it, where he's like on this island. I mean, he had done like Interstellar, and he'd done a bunch of.
No, but isn't there already stuff. What's the
Yeah, you're thinking of probably like the sequel film to the series Firefly.
Yeah.
So probably not a good title for another movie in a similar space. I mean, it's not like space exploring, right? But it's garbage. It's a movie that's built around a twist that doesn't land.
It's garbage.
I strongly don't recommend it, but I do tend to like Matthew McConaughey and things. I think he's fine. As a storyteller, that's the most interesting he's ever been to me.
Well, the interesting about Serenity, because I'm looking it up on IMDb now, the guy who directed it is Stephen Knight, who is responsible for Peaky Blinders and that movie Locke, which I thought was a really
Locke is excellent
and really bold and inventive and creative, and like was a really cool movie in that regard. Like, how the hell did he pull that off? It was fascinating. It was a really interesting movie. So that's I guess they're not all hits,
Well, it seems like maybe he's a little bit of a risk taker. I haven't seen Peaky Blinders, but Locke is a movie that, if it wasn't executed perfectly, would be Tom Hardy in a car talking to himself for 90 minutes. And
Would-
you could see how it'd be insufferable. But that, I mean, that's exactly what it is, but it's captivating.
yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, yeah.
I think Serenity is another idea that he had that maybe could have been executed reasonably well, and it's a misfire. It's all built around a single twist at the end that I think is the worst twist in possibly the history of cinema. I'm gonna spoil it.
Yeah, let's
Can I
spoil
spoil
it. Let's
it?
do it.
Okay, because no, anybody who hasn't seen this movie shouldn't care. And if you have seen this movie, then the entire movie takes place inside of a bass fishing simulator. That's the twist of the game. Is it's this thriller. It's this like kind of murdery mystery, sort of like building up suspense, you know, a little bit of a sci-fi bend, like eerie, ethereal thing. And it turns out that Matthew McConaughey's character has been programmed by his child into a bass pro fishing simulation, sort of like a knockoff brand computer game. And he's essentially playing with his father inside of that game, his sentient father, who's been recreated out of the code.
Sorry, stop. This is a huge.
It sounds like it's not real, right?
No. This is just a pet peeve of mine that drives me crazy, and I hear it all the time. And I like you, so I feel like this energy is not fair to you, but it's pronounced sentient.
Sentient.
And everyone says sentient, and it's one of these things where I'm like, am I the only one who knows how this world's pronounced?
Maybe it's an East Coast, West Coast thing, although we're from the same coast. Yeah. Siri. Hey, Siri. Hey, Siri. How do you pronounce sentient?
Here's an answer from yourdictionary.com. The definition of sentient is able to be.
You're right. All right. I concede.
It's I don't know why it irks me. It's almost a relatively obscure word, but I hear it wrong all the time. I'm like, no, sentient. I've heard it wrong in a movie. I heard it was in this terrible movie I watched last night. Anyway,
what terrible movie did you watch last night?
I want to finish talking about Serenity before I talk about it. And it actually all ties in because so what? It's a bass fishing simulation?
Exactly. So you think it's this, I don't know, maybe you can start to think it's something like a purgatory or something like that, like equally uninteresting and overdone. And it is a child playing with a simulation of his father.
Who cares?
That's who Matthew McConaughey. Exactly. Who cares? I mean, the whole thing is that like he needs love and support, and he programmed his father, who never gave enough of that, to love his character in the game. Exactly.
That's not a story. That's a character description.
Exactly. Yes. And the entire movie is hinging around like your jaws are gonna fucking drop when you find out what's really going on, and it doesn't land. So it's just, in my opinion, a waste of a movie. If the entire movie is the twist and the twist doesn't work, you're left with kind of nothing.
It has a 5.4 on IMDb.
A tie.
That's pretty high.
Deserve it.
Well, it's interesting that you because I watched a movie. It was recommended to me by a buddy, and it's called Time Trap. Have you ever heard about this? Mm-hmm. So it's independent. It's not even rated. I'd never heard of the directors before. I think it was made in Texas.
Where'd you find the movie? If anybody cares to screen it.
My friend recommended. I don't know. He gave me a copy. He gave me like a physical copy of it. It's directed by Mark Dennis and Ben Foster, but not the Ben Foster you're thinking of. Mm-hmm. Not the actor from 3:10 to Yuma. Just some dude. And like everything they've ever done, I these guys. It's lots of shorts. It's lots of off the not mainstream stuff. But this actually is a better movie than the one you just described because the ideas in it actually are really interesting, but terribly executed. Like the idea,
you see more of an artistic vision that could have been
what 100%.
They were going for.
If they knew how to write a script, it would have been an amazing movie. They just didn't. Like they didn't understand character motivation was not in the movie. Like people didn't behave like human beings. Like at one point, like this is a huge spoiler, but at one point they learn that all life on Earth is dead because they've been in this time cycle for like a million years or whatever, and like they barely react to it. Like they don't have like an existential.
Are they on like a spaceship of any sort? Are they removed from the Earth?
So here's the concept. The concept is these kids are like in like a spelunking like class or whatever.
Okay.
Like they go cave diving with this professor, and this professor is, I forgot exactly why, but he goes out into the desert. And that's the thing. The acting is not terrible. So it's like the people that carry the movie, they're not awful. They just, they're poorly written.
Anybody in it that you recognized?
Not a single person. Not one. No, I don't know any. I guess one of the girls is kind of up and coming because she's like a hot blonde and she's like, working.
You start seeing her pop up in some things.
Probably. And she was the one that I thought was working. You saw her working the most. She's in a TV series called The Baxters.
Not familiar with it, but I think I've heard of it. I think maybe it has to do with it's like a spin-off of like an adoption show or something like that.
Oh no, I don't even know where this is airing because it only has 16 reviews on IMDb, so it's not. It's probably like a web show or like a Christian show or something. An ensemble family drama based on best-selling novels from Karen Kingsbury that follows Elizabeth and John Baxter, their adult children. Oh, sounds terrible. Anyway, so this
spelunking.
Guy, so they're spelunking, and this guy, this professor, goes into this cave, and like he sees like there's like this kind of force field in the cave, right? And he sees like someone on the other side of it is kind of frozen, and then the whole thing, some things happen, and then he eventually walks in, and then the guy just like walks away, and he goes on exploring. Well, then like 2 days pass, and the guy doesn't come back, right? So the kids take it upon themselves to go figure out where the hell he's going. So they go, and essentially they go into like this cave or whatever, and then the ropes that they were rappelling on break, and they think it's this kid that they left to like watch up top. Essentially what the reveal is that time in these sides of this cave is going really slow, but the rest of time on Earth is flying by. So the ropes,
by the time they get out, humanity's deceased. Exactly.
Like the ropes didn't get cut. They frayed from age, and they eventually just snapped. And it was like, wow, that's a really interesting idea. And like, but the way they did this stuff, it was so fucking stupid. Like eventually the professor comes out of his his little time portal, and he goes to his car, and his car's like overgrown. And it's like it'd been sitting there for 30 years, and he doesn't fucking react to it. Like
that's a shame because everything that you're telling me is fascinating.
Like, right? It's a great concept, but he just like brushes the stuff aside. It's like, bro, you would definitely be like, did I get knocked out? Like you would want like the evidence in front of my eyes is telling me this car's been sitting here for 40 years. I know it hasn't. So what's going on? And that happened constantly, and it was enraging to watch. You're screaming at the screen at these characters not behaving the way people behave, but the idea is being so interesting. It's this weird dichotomy of things.
You want somebody to mirror the audience, and you can't be more interested than the characters who are supposed to be experiencing it.
Like they find out. So it's like I said, the ideas are really interesting. So at one point she goes out of the cave, like she climbs up. She's like the strongest climber or whatever, and she goes out, and in the sky is like this giant triangle, like spaceship or whatever. But the Earth is like scorched. It's all destroyed. And so she comes back and like explains the situation or explains what she saw, and basically they figured out that like every time the sun like would go overhead, it wasn't like a day, it was a year. Like they figured they somehow pieced this all together. And it was like, hey, your parents are dead. Everyone you've ever known is dead.
Right. You want to see that breakdown.
Like, can you take that in? Can we deal with that for a second? Your brother's dead. The kids you know at school, everyone's dead. Deal with it. And it just didn't. They never did. And it was just so like insane.
You don't get that catharsis.
No, and at the end, like some like alien from the future, like a space guy comes and rescues them. Like I said, these ideas are really interesting, and they go to like a spaceship and they leave Earth, and they all get saved, but they're all like smiling, like it's all worked out. It's like it didn't work.
And they never once
out.
dealt with the implications.
This could be worse.
That's frustrating.
You have no idea what this future is. Like there's been thousands of years. You might be an amoeba compared to these people. Anyway, so it's like it was one of those movies that had really interesting ideas, and it was just so poorly executed.
But on paper, it's very, very interesting. I watched a movie a couple of nights ago that had the exact opposite problem, and I think it affected my ability to enjoy it thoroughly just as much. But
do tell.
It was on paper, nothing happened. Almost nothing happened. But the way that the characters interacted and the direction of it was masterful. And I'm not sure if it was a directorial debut. The movie was called Scare Me. Have you heard of Scare Me?
No.
I said it has what's her name? Storm something from The Boys season 2. The woman who played
Oh, I really
Stormfront.
like her. Oh, I can't. I want to say Anna Paquin, but that's definitely not it. But she's in a show I really enjoy called "You're the Worst,"
Okay.
and she's fucking hilarious. Like she's just so well as a person, and it's the dialogue. That's a really well written. She's really, really funny in it. So when I cast her as Stormfront, even though I thought that season was garbage, I knew she was the right choice because she's such a funny, good, interesting actor.
Her.
She's great.
And the movie's worth a watch, I would say, especially if you already like her. She was great in the movie, and she has a lot to do in the movie. But the plot of it is, and this is played straight, and I thought at some point there was going to be a little bit more of a depth to the movie, but it's two writers who are separately holding themselves off to write in cabins, like maybe
it's so funny. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, I'm out. Like as soon as it's about Hollywood or the process or art, it's like I'm out. But anyway,
and it does try to do a little bit of like a meta deconstruction of horror. But my least favorite type of horror, like the creature feature style types of horror, like the more like classic blood and slasher, which this movie is not, but is disgusting.
Sorry. Her name's Aya Cash.
Aya Cash, that's right. And power goes out and they're stuck together overnight, and they decide to tell each other scary stories. So the entire movie is them in the living room of a cabin telling each other scary stories that they're inventing on the fly and acting them out. But the direction's fascinating. Like there's, the guy's pretending to be a werewolf, and when he like puts his hand over the couch, it's a werewolf hand that comes up. They're imagining it, right? And like the shadows are like telling the real story. You're seeing the shadows of them, but like
that's pretty interesting.
And like things like that made it kind of enjoyable watch. Like I liked seeing what the director was doing. It was worth watching for the craft of it. But fun. At the end of the day, like nothing is happening. It's two people telling each other stories. And I would rather have seen like 3 2-minute stories put into a short film with then like a little twist or something at the end, or a little bit of an extra hook. As a feature, I didn't really understand. Like 25 minutes to somebody kind of stream of consciousness-ing a story together that isn't as captivating as any movie would be. And it's like 3 of those or 4 of those crammed in with like 5 minutes of trying to maybe be a horror movie towards the end, but still not in a way that lands for me.
See, that
so every part of the acting is great. The writing, the characters are very well defined, and they have a really nice relationship. And, there's a lot of like jokes that land really well. Cinematography is excellent. They did a lot in one room that I really respect. They just shot a movie that takes place entirely in one cabin. I know how hard that is. They did an amazing job using the space and making it feel bigger than it is. But there was no story to keep me hooked on for me to like go and be excited to tell people about it. And it seems like so much talent and so much craft put into like an absence of a script. The opposite of the absence of a story, the opposite of what you were saying. You had a great story with the absence of craft in what you watched last night.
This is super fucking weird. Okay. What's up? This is weird. All right. So I think like this the weird thing notwithstanding, everything about that sounds like my first instinct was 100% correct. Mm-hmm. Because it's like it just sounds like someone jerking themselves off intellectually for like 2 hours, and it's written, directed, and stars somebody, which is like, yeah, that's what this is. Funniest fucking thing. I had an interaction with this guy though one time online, like out of fucking nowhere.
Oh, okay.
Because I was looking, I think this is the guy. Because his name is Josh Rubin.
It is.
Because I was looking at, I think this is him. I was looking at reels online, and it just came up, and he wasn't even big or famous or anything like that. And I just thought it was so funny. He had this great Professor Snape impression. It's hilarious. It was just lots of great jokes, and like it was really funny. So I think I tweeted at him or whatever. I was just like, hey man, and we had like this back and forth and kind of like not a relationship form, but like there was an internet like little you favorite each other's tweets and shit like that. Like I forgot all about this person until right this second. But that is fucking weird, man. That's a really bizarre thing. Well, I guess it's good that he's making things. I mean, he's involved in a lot. He's got 2 projects coming out or whatever. But yeah, that whole thing sounds like a completely misguided endeavor.
And it's fun for the sake, like you were saying, his reel was really funny. He's got good characters. They're playing all sort, each person embodies maybe 12 or 15 different characters in the storytelling, and they're really committed to it. When they're telling each other these scary stories, so you get to see a lot of shades of each actor. So it's fun in that way, but it almost feels like it's an hour and 45 minutes, and 90 minutes of it feels like improv comedy, like long form improv
I was
comedy.
literally just gonna say it sounds like it should be at UCB as like a sketch.
Exactly.
Like one of those like, concept shows or something.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like I feel like he needed to sit down with a mentor and have a mentor be like, I understand it. There's like merit here, but this is not a feature film. It just felt like the wrong format for what he wanted to do. But the way that he did it was great. I mean,
that's why I just find so frustrating. It's just like, don't these people have friends that'll tell them that this doesn't work? Like, while there's stuff here, you're going in a right direction. Like, that's what's so frustrating about the Time Trap movie. It was like, these are great ideas, and your script is terrible. You need to go back and make these people behave like real people, and it'll be so much better. But
yeah, there's not always that much accountability, I guess, though, at that lower level. What was his name again? This guy, Josh?
Ruben. I'm getting all these fucking texts. Josh Rubin.
So, I mean, he could have
resumes
conceivably self-funded this. I mean, it wouldn't have taken that much money or VFX or anything like that. So I can imagine him having a lot of creative control, especially as the writer and director. And then he's controlling his own lead performance. So I could, I'm assuming he produced it as well. So, there might just not be, and it might be similar for the movie that you watched last night, where it's just, that's the story that they wanted to tell. And if this is what he wanted to do, he succeeded. The core concept of it doesn't seem to trade. It's like I played through the Tomb Raider games, that reboot Tomb Raider trilogy that they started in 2015.
Yeah,
and then I watched the Alicia Vikander Tomb Raider because I loved the game so much. I was like, all right, let me watch the movie it's based on. And it was obviously a nod to the game mechanics the entire time. And I like the movie fine. It's like a solid C, like Saturday afternoon, you catch it on TV kind of movie.
You're very forgiving.
I am. I don't have a lot like negative to say about it. There's just almost nothing substantial enough there to like elevate it to like what Indiana Jones was doing cinematically in the same sort of genre. They were clearly trying to capture what made the game really enjoyable in film, and it just didn't translate. So that's my point is that like if you're sitting there and you're watching the premise of Scare Me at like a UCB long form improv sort of situation, that sort of spontaneity and like would be a lot of fun maybe live if you're
and
into
you'd be much more generous. Like your criticisms would be much more generous. It's like I'm much more kind to someone being funny on a podcast versus doing like stand up that's written and rehearsed, and like it's like this is a finished product, this movie you're presenting. And so it's like you had time to ruminate on all these ideas. And so I'm judging it through that lens versus like if I'm live and watching you kind of, you're on the fly. It's you're tight,
spontaneous.
Spontaneous. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. That's not really an excuse. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you have to, like, you're presenting a finished product that should be finished.
And just just leaning into the story, into the format that tells a story like that well. You did disappear. You've been replaced by your logo.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Sorry, I'm just checking my phone, and I just didn't want to do that, like, because I have like 4 texts all of a sudden just in the past like 4 minutes, and I just don't like.
All right, well, hopefully all is well.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. It seems like nothing's too concerning. Well, the other movie that I watched it last night. It's a new one on Netflix. It just came out, and it was in the top 10. It's called Outside the Wire.
I haven't even heard of it.
It's not good.
Okay.
But it's coming from a good place. Like, so it stars Anthony Mackie. You know him?
Yeah, Falcon. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I usually enjoy him. I don't know him too much outside of Avengers and stuff, but he's fine. I like him.
I mean, he was really good in a few things. I think he was that him in Half Nelson? Was he in that movie with Ryan Gosling? Where
Nelson, is he a teacher in that movie?
Yeah, he's a crackhead teacher. It's really interesting. I mean, it's definitely like one of those indie movies you're supposed to feel, but it's like it was still really good. And it kind of made Ryan Gosling's career. No, I don't think that was him. But I think he was in that movie. He was in the Eminem movie, right?
8 Mile?
8 Mile. Yeah.
Let's see.
Papa Doc. And he
I've
gets
seen a lot of his work.
humiliated. Yeah, dude, Anthony Mackie is a good actor.
Sure.
I don't think he's a leading man, but I do think he's a good actor. Like the second season of Altered Carbon, it's not watchable. And he is a big part of it. Like he's a big reason. Like he can't carry a show like that. It just doesn't work. So this is, I don't know what they were really trying to do, but it's actually really similar to my script. It's like there's these robot soldiers and they are stationed in like the Ukraine, like Russia area. And this kid like has to go to like the front lines because in the field, he made a split-second decision to do a drone strike on this, like carrier of like enemy soldiers or whatever, and 2 Marines died, but it kind of seemed like he saved 38 of the 40, what I mean? So it was kind of like collateral damage. So they send him.
Is he a robot, or there are robots and he's a human?
There are these big robots, and they look very distinct robots. They're actually pretty cool looking. They kind of have big camera heads, but they're also like the least threatening, like giant robot warriors in the world. Like they get taken out left and right. Like they're not a threat. Like, and they also just carry like normal weapons. Like it's like just like M79 or the law, like the light machine guns that we use at like squad. Like it's like give them something big and menacing. Give them like fucking cannons and shit. Like make them look scary. Sure. Anyway, because it's just like, well, if he can just get defeated like any other soldier, and what's the point?
What's the point of even having them be robots?
Yeah, they must be like $4 billion a piece. Why would you? Anyway,
I'd say what you will about the Mandalorian finale. They did a good job building up what are they? The Dark Troopers, those robot troopers. I'm assuming you've seen it.
I know of it. I haven't seen it. I just got bored with the Mandalorian and just gave up.
Oh, you gotta. I think it sticks the landing. You're gonna think it's like schlocky fan service, but I really like it.
Fan service, but it's good. It's important. It's good schlocky fan service. I'm glad they did that. I think it worked. Everybody responded to it. So,
but they had a really imposing robot army in there. They set it up really, really nicely. So that's all I was gonna say. I assumed you had seen it.
Season 1 and stuff. I mean, they made the stormtroopers. I mean, they were like the bad guys in THX. Where you can just push them over. They're all in your mind. They're not. It's just like they were worthless. They were like paper cutouts. It was terrible.
Yeah, stormtroopers have historically been that way.
Yes and no. I mean, at least they felt like menacing. These are cartoons. I mean, they're just all getting like it's like you blow them over. It's horrible.
There was in the making of that Mandalorian season 2, one of the directors like, I just kept asking for more stormtroopers. I love killing stormtroopers. Like any scene I can kill a stormtrooper, and so I think that's at least something that they're doing intentionally.
Zero threat. Then they're not scary. Good call. Lean into that.
Right. It's just something to kill.
It's childish, I think. Anyway,
so the Anthony Mackie movie,
right? So. The kid is got to go into the field. Like they reassign him instead of like court-martialing him for disobeying a direct order and killing 2 Marines. They send him to they reassign him, and he's under Anthony Mackie. And like about a half hour in, it's a reveal Anthony Mackie is actually a robot. He's this 4th generation biotech, he calls himself, which is interesting. But like,
and he knew this, or he didn't know this.
He didn't until Mackie revealed it. He showed it to him. He's like all like robot-y and like, translucent. And it's interesting, except that like he doesn't behave like a robot at all. He just kind of behaves like a guy. Like
we were wondering like who would program him that way, kind of thing.
Well, it was things like he was shooting his gun at one point and it ran out of ammo and he looked. I'm like, I'm pretty sure a robot would be able to count how much ammunition.
Sure.
You would have to look at something like it was just weird. And they had all these big action scenes where he's like just plowing through guys like John Wick. And you're like, yeah, this isn't cool. He's a robot. Like this is what he should be doing. Like it doesn't come across badass. It comes across stupid.
Takes the wind out of the sails a little bit.
Yeah. It just didn't work.
The sound you're hearing is Jared's child in the back.
Yes, it is. I wasn't sure if it was getting picked up or not.
It didn't pick up. That's okay. Kids are good.
So sorry. Yeah,
it's fine, dude. So he eventually
his mother is home. My wife is taking care of him. I'm not just leaving him out there if anybody's nervous.
Essentially, essentially it was a similar idea, like where there was interesting ideas, like seeing robots in the future, in war. It didn't have a political agenda, which I really found refreshing. It was interesting idea of kind of like a rogue AI thing, like kind of going off the rails, but really what it felt like it was a season of TV condensed down into 2 hours without, and like tried to do so many things that the show, it just didn't earn. It tried to go for these moments that were supposed to be moments, and they weren't. And
Netflix seems to have a couple of movies that feel like they would have worked better as a season of TV. The Old Guard, maybe for one.
I didn't see that.
I didn't pay too much attention to it when I watched it. I was liking it fine, but it like wasn't holding me in the way that I hoped it would. But the same concept over a season of TV, giving it that much reason. You know the premise of it with these immortals that are
mortal body assassins or something.
Essentially, like that, to me, that's a season of TV sort of plot where you have a lot of room to go with it. You don't try to put it into an entire movie. The Netflix movies in particular, for whatever reason, seem to have that vibe sometimes.
Netflix has not made a good movie as far as I'm concerned. Actually, that's not true. I can think of one, and it was about, like, it was something that you were talking about just before with your movie taking place in one location and Scare Me taking place in one location. It's a movie called Arq, ARQ.
Okay, yeah, I've seen it advertised, but I haven't watched it.
I loved it. I thought it was excellent. Not like it was a genius movie, but I had like no expectations when I walked in, and I was like, wow, that was really good. And it was basically it was like, it utilized the concept of one location, but really well, because it threw in time travel. So you would like, it wasn't just the same environment. It was kind of like, they re-experienced the same moments, but it was kind of germane to the story.
They got a lot out of that one location where it didn't feel repetitive.
But it was fucking genius. Like, I was like, that's a really great way to use the space.
It took me like 10 years to realize that Cube was a one location movie. That they had one single room that they were filming in. Like watching that movie as a teenager and like then watching it with that perspective of nostalgia, I felt the size of that cube every single time they went into a new room. No part of me thought they were dropping back onto the same set. It felt like that expansive maze. Have you seen Cube? You know what I'm talking about?
Like in high school.
Oh, it's worth a rewatch. The sequels aren't, but there's a fun. They're trapped in like this giant like alien Rubik's Cube trap thing. Where
that's not the movie with the Private Pile. What's his name? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It was Fisk and Daredevil.
That's not him. No, Halo, right? That's not.
No, that's the Cell.
The Cell. Right. Okay.
No,
I don't actually. Maybe I never did see this.
It's worth it. It's they're trapped in this kind of like this maze where they have to try to escape the maze, and every room in this maze has different traps, lethal traps that are it's a body count movie where like every different room somebody
here
dies.
And there, yeah.
But then there's like everybody's got like a different like either like handicap or skill, and they have to work together to try to get out or whatever. They don't know why they're in the room.
It's an indie horror movie. Is that like, was it made as an independent horror movie?
I mean, maybe it was,
but in a good way. Like, it looks like
it had 2 sequels at that point. I know, it's a something of a cult classic now. They used to air it on TV all the time. I think I watched it like once a month on Sci-Fi Channel growing up.
Huh.
It's worth it. It's worth the 90 minutes or whatever it is.
I'll have to take a look. But you were saying, do you? So we're going back to what we were saying about Netflix's movies,
right?
Any Netflix movies that you like original content? Like, I honestly feel like I've been disappointed by almost every single one.
Yeah, every single one of those movies seems to suffer, except for I haven't seen it, but the one that I can imagine being different is Klaus. Everybody talks about Klaus in a different way. That
pretty good.
So
it wasn't great, but it was good. It was fine.
Seems to at least be the standout with people from similar perspectives to ourselves. But they all seem to suffer from a lack of creative feedback. That I think that they give the artist the reins to do whatever they want. And I think they underscore the importance of the studio system in some way, or at least like producerial insights.
No, it's interesting because any kind of comedian I've ever heard talk about their experience with Netflix, they said that their notes were terrific, that they always like gave them really insightful notes. So yeah, you're right though. Like the Five Bloods or whatever, that Spike Lee.
The Spike Lee. I didn't watch it.
It was fucking endless.
Yeah, they're all too long. Every
way
one of those
long
Netflix movies.
and meandering and indulgent. It was like you don't have to put everything you shot in the movie, man.
Right.
Like, cut some of it. You know, it was kind of like The Irishman. It was like, dude, you could lose an hour of this easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
The Irishman should have just been that last 30 minutes of it when they're in the nursing homes.
Yeah, you're right.
That should have been the framing device. That was the only interesting part of the movie, in my opinion.
I agree. It's like the only idea that I could take away from any kind of interest. It's like it's building towards this like suspenseful payoff that Jimmy Hoffa dies. It's like, yeah, no shit. That could be the most famous fucking mafia hit in you know, the history. And fucking De Niro with fake blue eyes has got to be the most distracting thing I've ever seen in my life.
Or his old man body with the young man face, like struggling to kick the guy outside on the curb.
Why did they go so wide on that? You could have gotten around that with editing.
You could have.
Like, why you could have done shaky
Hubris.
cam and the, you know, it looked so awful. It's like, what and what
Just
is
recast.
the virtue? Like what's the virtue in having him play the whole part all the way through? Like when he could just be a younger man. Like I never bothered me that Goodfellas opens up with a young Ray Liotta. Like who?
Right,
cares?
it didn't have to be him aged down to 9 years old or 12 years old.
It would be weird even if you could pull it off. Like.
Well, it was weird. They haven't pulled that off, in my opinion. I'm sure yours too, in that de-aging of the characters. I watched some of Gemini Man a couple of nights ago. I couldn't get through most of it, but I didn't even think that looked great. And then they brought Mark Hamill back, as I'm sure you know, in The Mandalorian, and that still had some uncanny valley. When he looks so much like Sebastian Stan, and I know that Sebastian Stan has said that he was open to playing the role if he was ever offered, and I know that Mark Hamill said like, yeah, no, you guys can go for that, and Disney still felt the need to, from what I understand, they recreated every part of him. They didn't have Mark Hamill come in to do voice acting or anything like that. It was like entirely a deep fake performance.
Okay,
just unnecessary.
Yeah, I will say though, in his particular situation, considering how dirty that character was done in the sequels and how much they just disrespected the entire legacy of the character, I forgive it because it's like a necessary thing.
I like the character coming back. I like seeing any moment of like Luke at his full power. That's really just, you know, cathartic to feel and see. Like you built to that for the entire trilogy. You're getting a new trilogy. You want to be able to kind of enjoy that a little bit, but instead you get like a mopey emo hermit. So I'm glad that they put it in there, but I didn't think they needed to execute it with such innovation that I felt like distracted from it. I mean, they landed. I
think like in this instance, it was the best way to handle it because it would have almost
see Mark Hamill.
I don't care, but it would have just felt like more of an insult again. It's like, oh, you bring the character back and he can't even play the guy. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
fair enough.
I think it was the right call considering like the climate around this, you know, this guy and like the whole franchise. You know what I mean? It was like the last time we saw him, he's like drinking fucking titty milk and shit. It was so weird.
Right.
And like, so it's like, yeah, no, just like it's almost like an apology to the fans, like our bad. You know what I mean? Like whatever their crazy shit they were trying to do, it didn't work. We understand that. And this is, you know, we respect you and what you like. And here he is.
And I assume they're kind of doing that with the Obi-Wan series too, because I know people loved Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan.
I assume nothing when it comes out of Disney. Nothing.
Fair enough. But I mean, that's such a beloved character by a lot of people, trapped in those 3 movies that are by and large not beloved, that I feel like giving him his own mini series where they maybe elevate the rest of, you know,
there's so much there's so much love for the fucking prequel trilogy, and I have no idea why. None. Like I'm like, it's crazy how much people they talk about. Like I see the memes all the time. It's like still, I'm just like, I'm not gonna hate on
some good memes came out of it, but they're not like endlessly rewatchable the way that I feel the original trilogy is.
I don't even think they're good, let alone endlessly rewatchable. I mean, they're stupid. Like the dialogue sounds like it's written by someone who's never heard people talk. Like
the dialogue is terrible. George Lucas has never been great at dialogue. He's always had like, didn't Lawrence Kasdan write the first 2?
I know he wrote
the original.
He wrote the second one.
The second one.
That's the thing. Lucas didn't write or direct 2 or 3,
and he had full control over the first. But his ideas in the original or not the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, I feel like novelized make a lot more sense. I think it's another one where he got the wrong medium for the story that he was telling, because it's political thriller setting up another story that's not like a 3-act action fantasy movie the way that the original trilogy is. But I haven't read them, but I've read excerpts from the novelization of those 3 movies, because a lot of people like to point to the novels to say they actually executed those moments way better in the novelization afterwards.
Star Wars is,
but well, no, of course, but they do in those when you have access to all the tools that you have in long form novel format. When you have that kind of storytelling, the moments land a lot better. Maybe because they're writing around a little bit of what the movies did.
Yeah,
but I can see that sort of plot working nicely as like one of those classic science fiction stories. It doesn't make for good or thrilling Star Wars movies.
The ideas aren't terrible, honestly. They're not. I mean, it actually kind of, if it was better handled, it's really not a bad story. I mean, it's just a lot of the decisions they don't support anything. They just are in there. Like him being born a slave, like who cares? Like that doesn't matter. Like
just anything heavy is, I felt constantly undermined, right? Like how much the I hate sand monologue totally undermines the gravity of the atrocities that we're supposed to feel like Anakin just did when you're laughing at the performance.
And so much of it surrounding Tatooine is like, why?
Most of the series surrounds Tatooine for
what
some
is
reason.
The fucking deal with this? Like, it was supposed to be a shitty place to live to begin with. It was somewhere to escape, and it's like, and it makes no sense. Like,
it was obscure, but then because
Shmi ends up living on fucking Tatooine, and that's where they hide. It's like it's the first place he'd fucking look. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, there's so many things wrong with it, and the way they run it into the sequel trilogy, like the original trilogy, like it's supposed to be like dovetailed, right? It's like whoa, that contradicts the original stories,
and like, it deflates a lot of the power out of the original.
Ancient religion is not something that went out of style 10 years ago,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, an iPhone is not an ancient piece of technology. You know what I mean? It's just so ridiculous. Like, it's like, no, man, like you should have had an intern go through those movies and come up with just the list of things you can't contradict, because you contradict your own film so much. It's unwatchable. But
and I think it's because you gave George Lucas, not you, but because they gave George Lucas solitary, like, creative control over the original trilogy. It's that same problem where you're like, they don't actually have the perspective. They didn't, do the first 3. He didn't do the first 3 by himself. He didn't have the ability to do the prequel 3 by himself. And I just think you can't give one person that much control 100% of the time. It works a lot of the time. It pays off a lot of the time.
It works.
But
it usually works if you're someone like Scorsese. But Lucas,
but even Scorsese, he's got probably a lot of people around him.
But like he hadn't directed anything in like 20 years, 30 years. Like he was out of practice.
He has THX, he has American Graffiti, and he has this. I mean, he didn't direct Star Wars, right? He didn't do any of the original trilogy.
He directed.
He did do the first one.
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. Like, let me look.
Outside of that, a lot of his movies. I mean, what did he do? That one that was like a
Yeah, dude. The last thing
animated one, Epic.
Dude, sorry. The last thing he directed before Phantom Menace was A New Hope. 25 years before, the last thing he directed was A New Hope.
He didn't do that movie Epic, that animated one?
Not according to his IMDb.
Oh, wow. Yeah. All right. Yeah, then maybe don't throw in the biggest franchise of all time.
3 movies back to back on this gigantic scale. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, it's.
But I would still rather rewatch the prequel trilogy than the sequel trilogy.
Oh my God. Of course.
So are you off the Disney franchise train completely? Do you have any stock in the Marvel series anymore or anything like that? I
was never that crazy about the MCU to begin with. I enjoy it. I think they're really fun, and I thought Infinity War was unbelievable.
Did you like Endgame?
No,
really,
just fine.
Infinity War was the stronger one for you.
Way stronger. If Endgame took way too long to get going. The time travel thing was fine, but they contradict their own mechanic like right away. They're like, oh, we only have these pin particles. Well, we can go back in time and get more. It's like, yeah, you knew that the whole time. Like, okay.
That's why I never want to write a time travel movie. There's just so many like plot loopholes in terms of like you can solve this problem. You have to write your way out of every possible like audience member going like, can't you just like, why is that a problem? You have a literal time machine. You have a do-over.
Looper tried that, but the whole thing, we're not going to get into it. It's like,
No.
we just won't talk about paradoxes. Okay, I guess so.
I like that movie Triangle. Primer.
The only one that I've ever seen do it like airtight.
Triangle, in my opinion, nails it as well. It's got a heavy. If you told me it was the follow up to Primer, I would believe you. It's not as good. It's not as heady. It's more of just like a Twilight Zone episode, but really well executed in my opinion. And it's more of like a time loop than a time travel thing, but it's internally consistent.
There's a picture of a girl with an axe on a boat. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
It's got like I don't know, like a time. No, not. Look at what else he did. I think he has another movie in a similar tone.
I wanted to do. I did want to get back to your question though, just about the whole thing with the MCU and so I'm vaguely interested. Like I'm not MCU. I'm not interested. I think they're in a really tough position because they tried so hard to do the woke stuff and tried to make like, Captain Marvel be like the future of the whole thing. And they leaning into like this girl power and they're kind of like humiliating their heroes and stuff like that. I think right now they've had enough time to reflect and realize that that's not going to work. So I don't know. Maybe there would be some interesting stuff. Like I said, I think some of it's fun. Apparently WandaVision is very interesting. Haven't seen it yet.
I did watch it. If they had followed up like they were planning on Endgame, I know they did Far From Home, but that's kind of like a little, I don't know, like epilogue. It barely feels like its own movie to me. But if they had followed up that saga with Black Widow like they were intending to, I think that would have been the death of the MCU, at least for me as a viewer. I have no interest in that movie. Feels very samey. It feels retready.
I also never look. I know Black Widow's a beloved character, but I don't get her or Hawkeye in those situations. They make
I don't either.
Sense. Like
any person in that movie, anybody else on that team can outpower Black Widow. That she's inherently uninteresting to me. It's superheroes, and she's like, she's got moves.
Delicate. Like she's so like she's fragile. She's like a person. Like, and they're fighting like gods and shit. Like one stray bullet and she's down. Like
exactly.
And both are like, well, okay, then give her iron suits. Give her an iron suit. That would make sense because Tony Stark's just a guy. So just give them. But don't.
He has a hook.
So it just glares there, open.
Yeah, I agree.
And it makes no sense. And I'm like, it's stupid. Like, it's fun.
I have no interest in that Hawkeye show. I agree with you. Even if he becomes whatever his name is when he does the sword for a while. I don't know if you know, but he's a sword guy for a while. Even if he does that in the series, I don't have a lot of interest in that. But I think because of the coronavirus, with them having to follow up that whole Infinity War saga with WandaVision, with that being the first step back, you have one of the most interesting and underutilized characters that Marvel has the rights to, being the Scarlet Witch, one of the most like overpowered but balanced by the emotional complexity of her arcs usually. Having her and Vision, I've never been a huge fan of, but he's fine. Having that weird zany show that's so completely different from anything you've seen in Marvel is so refreshing that I think that like it's gonna reinvigorate people and to keep watching the saga. Like there is fatigue after 27 movies or however much it is, that I feel like if Scarlet Witch came out as the next offering, you'd roll your eyes. But WandaVision's an interesting foray back.
It seems like an interesting foray back, and it seems like artistically like noble and bold. Like it honestly feels like a well-conceived concept that's like creative, and it's like that's interesting. Like I like that they're taking a big swing like that.
Yeah, stylistically extremely different. It's a lot of fun, especially if you like what it's referencing. Every episode, from what it seems like, is a different decade of sitcoms condensed into Wanda and Vision being the stand-ins for like Darren and what's her name on Samantha on Bewitched was the second episode, was an obvious like Bewitched parody sort of thing. But the premise, as far as I can see, they actually haven't dropped the shoe yet at all in terms of what this show is actually about after 2 episodes, but they're only 22 minutes. So they're very, very easily digestible. So you don't even, I don't know, care after 44 minutes of watching it that they haven't gotten very far yet, because it just feels like a breeze to watch through anyway. But it seems to be something like, this infinitely powerful person who has lost, the love of her life, Vision, has created this world that's like this perfect idyllic sitcom world, where she's happy with the person that she lost, and she's doing everything in her power not to let that illusion break. But whatever these beings are, if they're creations of her own or people she's trapping in there with her, or if they're all trapped in there together for some reason, are trying to like snap out of it and change things, and she's trying to force it to stay into that like happy sitcom world, which is very, very interesting to me. Like I'd watch that as a premise outside of it being superheroes or being Marvel characters. It's actually a movie called The Nines.
I would say about WandaVision, it is very an interesting idea, and I like I said, I respect the decision. I really do. I just think what a lot we're kind of all forgetting is that, like, look, man, Disney really hasn't put out a good Marvel movie. Like, they bought the franchise in between Infinity War and Endgame. Endgame is passable at best. Far From Home is, I didn't see it, but I imagine it couldn't be even. It's probably even tamer than the other, Spider-Man movie. And even if it's the same, tenor, the same tone, they really don't have a good track record with these franchises. Like, they have a complete disaster in the sequel trilogy that insults the fans and destroys the legacy. Even The Mandalorian, while it's got a lot of credit, it's got a lot of people enjoying it. To me, it's fairly inept. Like, it doesn't have it doesn't work on either level. It doesn't work as like an episodic show, and it doesn't work as standalone episodes. It's so many side quests and just cheap little silly things. I mean, like, how many fucking times is that ship going to be broken and then fly? Like, it's just things that, and look, that's fine. Enjoy it. I don't care. Like, I'm not telling people what to like or what not to like. Just for me, I just haven't seen any evidence that that I should invest my energy in with this company and what they're putting into. You know what I mean? Like, never was that in love with the MCU anyway. So them making bad movies with that, don't care. And like Star Wars, like, I'm done. Like, I'm fucking done. Like, you're gonna have to produce something completely fucking genius for me to, like, you know what I mean? Like, invest my energy again. I'm actually almost kind of happy that The Mandalorian, I don't love it, because like that would be hard for me to like get back into falling in love with something like that again. Like, knowing how the potential for them to fuck it up is so high.
Yeah, it's a little exhausting with how much content is coming out. I mean, I'm sure you've heard they're doing like 7 shows, 7 Star Wars shows, something like that.
They've been saying a lot of stuff.
Well, like, okay, yeah, true. You'll see what actually makes it to air.
They have a hit on with The Mandalorian, and so they're going to tell their investors, we're doing this. We are going. Star Wars shows are the future, but we'll see. They do this all the time where they announce things that never get made, and who knows? I mean, maybe. But
there's one I am interested in that's like Knights of the Old Republic stuff. I don't know if you ever played those games.
I never did.
They were big in like the mid 2000s or whatever it was. But that like old, like before, the ancient Jedi Order, right? Like the story set back there, completely free from the through line that we've had throughout all of the Star Wars content. Now I'm interested to see them play in that space.
Look, I'm not opposed to these ideas. These ideas are interesting. It's just that, like, right after
execution gives you pause.
Well, right after The Mandalorian finished, they put out this Star Wars Legends comic, which is like the wokest of the woke. It's non-binary characters, and it's like gender orientation is a part of these Jedis and all this bullshit that like has no place in Star Wars. And, it's just modern day politics thrust where it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so it's like that came out of the same company at the same time. Like, I think what, a potential reality is they're just going to like reveal, pull the curtain back, and it's like, the old switcheroo. And it's like, yeah, the fucking Mandalorian's gay, and you know what I mean? Baby Yoda is like a gender studies professor.
Fair enough.
It's like, it's just, I don't trust them. They haven't earned my trust. They just haven't earned my trust yet. So it's like, I will check out some of the content. I'll probably check out WandaVision, but I'm not like, yay,
Well, yeah, WandaVision, I can see you having, a little bit of. I think one of the reasons why I'm excited to see where it goes is that I have that investment in the overall story. I have a vague idea of where it could go from similar arcs that have happened in the comics, and I like the character, so I'm being charitable to it. But I think if it was a brand new show, like and this is what happened after 2 episodes. There's a lot more people that would be like, what is this? You know, you're not doing enough to earn my view, my 30 minutes a week or whatever it is.
Yeah. But that I would rather a failure go on like in that regard. Like I'd rather a failure happen like just because you took too big of a swing. You tried and it was maybe unapproachable. Like, because I think like audiences now are the most educated in history. You know, I think I've said that to you before, and I've definitely said it on this channel before, but I think it's like, so you need to find new ways to challenge your audience and present storytelling like in a really innovative way. Because I think if you rely on like the old ways or like, you know, what's come before, what's always worked, people are going to tune out like mentally almost immediately. So I think the way into the future is to challenge your audience, is to really give like a really try. Because like The Witcher is authentically a pretty challenging story because it like has those two storylines like in different times in history, and it doesn't tell you this, and you only have like little context clues to try to figure it out. And even when the reveal happens, you're kind of like, wait, what? Like, what's going on here? But that is engaging.
I remember pausing The Witcher and trying to figure out like a character by his portrait on the wall and how old he was in the portrait or whatever it was, where we were in the timeline. Yeah.
And that's really engaging for an audience, for a modern audience, because you have to try so hard to figure it out. Like, you know, it's why my favorite show is The Expanse, because it's so mature and the storylines are so complex and you really have to pay attention. Otherwise you miss it. And like, that's what you need nowadays. Like we've seen it all before and you need to really try.
Yeah, like they remade that movie Rebecca, right? Have you seen the original Rebecca?
I don't know.
Early Hitchcock.
No.
And I haven't seen the original, but I watched the remake with Armie Hammer and Lily James.
Armie Hammer, the cannibal.
I know. Yeah, I watched it before the text messages came out.
Yeesh.
But it's filmed with modern sensibilities. I'm going to assume, and I don't know if this is true, that it's a direct recreation of the original's plot. They're both based on the same book, so that the story stays the same. And it's shot with modern sensibilities. I mean, it's a period piece. It takes place in like the early 1900s. And the entire time, I felt like I was trying to be one step ahead of it to try and figure out where it was going, like what's being foreshadowed. And then the reveal was, and I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was fine. It's a like an easy recommendation if you feel like it, but like by no means like take the time to see it if you have other things.
Sure.
But the reveal at the end was so underwhelming and simple for what I feel like you're used to seeing in these sort of like domestic, not necessarily murder mysteries, but like these domestic thrillers and like, oh, there's a ghost in the past and like what's happening and what's the deal with the dead wife and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That you're waiting for something much, much bigger, because with all the stories that we've seen done in that sort of vein, you just expect anything that's coming out that's new to be innovative in some way. So the whole time I'm engaged and excited and I'm waiting to see like what happens. And then when it comes out that it's something a little bit more basic, you just feel like there was no need to make this. Like you have seen this story 100 times.
Yeah, that was like, there was a movie called Signal with Lawrence Fishburne. And it was like, the twist was like, you did that in Dark City. I've already seen that. Like, why would you make that exact same twist? Like, that's not a twist. Like that, the first time it's really interesting. Now it's like, no, it's not. He's on a spaceship. Okay. I've already seen this. The problem with a twist movie is that that's the type of thing that used to work like in the 90s. You know what I mean? Because there was you weren't streaming it. There was no internet. You had to go see it to experience it, right? You had to like, that was the thing. It was like, and it was like this cultural moment, like The Sixth Sense is a great example, you know, and it's like, whoa, the twist is crazy. You got to go see it. Like, but that's not how we communicate about media anymore. Like, we don't have like water cooler talk. Like, people don't get their recommendations from like word of mouth. Like what's like, there isn't that same pulse of culture. You know what I mean? Like, everything kind of exists in pockets, and, you know, I just don't feel like that is an applicable, like that works anymore. Like a twist is
twists do work, but movies built around twists don't work anymore.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like you could like a simple hook and like bait and switch was enough, I think. But you know, before, like you're saying, there were more educated audiences or more content or more just like the ability for spoilers, where if that one hook is gone, then that's your entire movie. Or if the twist doesn't work, like Serenity. But there are movies that execute twists, but if you took the twist out of it, it's still a really solid movie.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with a twist. It's fun when you're like, whoa, like that didn't see that coming. Like, you know, your whole reality is messed with. But like, yeah, it can't hinge on that.
Right. You don't want to build only to the twist. It's
Right.
also a huge risk to take because if it doesn't end up paying off, then your movie doesn't work.
Right. Right.
you only have the twist. You don't have anything else redeeming to draw back on.
Right. Yeah. It's like, and that's kind of like what M. Night Shyamalan's career became. Like, it's like, you know, it's just these twists, like building a whole like thing. Although you like Shyamalan, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I'm something of a Shyamalan apologist, but I also know what you're saying. Because I think that he did like one of those things that you see a lot of comedians do when they get successful, where they're mocking their own voice or they're trying to imitate their own voice.
Yeah, right. You become a parody of yourself.
Right. And you see that with like the Amy Schumers of the world who are like mildly edgy, but then they got like typecast that way and then they come out and that's the only type of joke that they have. And I think Shyamalan was the same way, where Sixth Sense, I think, works as a fantastic story. Yeah. And then he was so locked into being the twist guy that he had to shoehorn one into every movie. And then you get things like The Village. And I actually don't mind The Village, but that movie works without a twist. That movie almost works better without a twist. He built a really solid movie. And then that last 4 minutes of like, or not even like 30 seconds of the reveal of them being in the modern era is either,
Did we talk about Signs?
We have talked about Signs, I think, before. I don't remember if we did it on the podcast or not.
That is the stupidest fucking movie. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, that is dumb as hell. Like, so the idea, like, look, I like the God matrix over everything. I have no problem with that at all. That's not why I don't like it. Why I don't like it is these things die from water. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen fucking morning dew or condensation, but I got news for you. There's water in the air all the time.
Right.
What do you think fucking clouds are? These things would have died the second they stepped outside of their ship. This is not a twist. What is this? This is so stupid.
I could see in some ways there being like, like nitrogen is lethal to us if it's all that we're having or something, but so is water if we're drowned in water. But I can see it.
If you explode when it touches your skin.
Yeah, then you're dead long before then. You're right. That specific thing doesn't work. The structure of that movie is really solid though. Every part of that movie works, but you're right. That specific element of it doesn't.
And that's the whole movie. I mean, it hinges on that a little bit.
There is a perspective that I think you're going to dislike because if it's not in the movie, then you shouldn't consider it. And I understand that. Like, you shouldn't be able to excuse something if it's not obvious in the, storytelling language just in the movie. But that whatever these creatures were manifesting as the deepest fear of the individual. And in this religious family, that these things were something akin to demons that were manifesting itself through the cultural lens of being alien invaders, but they were in reality something closer to demons. And this religious family, the water had actually been like transformed into something like holy water. They kept calling the girl the little angel. She was leaving the water everywhere. She was somehow blessing it. And I've read like people analyzing it through this lens. I can't regurgitate it as well as people I'm sure could look up a theory like that. I'm sure that's available on the internet, where M. Night's apparent intention for the movie was not for you to believe that these are literally alien invaders who are literally allergic to water, but that is how it reads, That's
the problem. So it's like, if you need to fix the writing, it's like, then the writing's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not saying like enjoy whatever you want, but like, that's not in the film. Like, there's, you can interpret like The Shining to mean, a lot of different things. You know what I mean? Like there's lots, it's sort of ambiguous, but there are things that Kubrick puts in his movies for a reason. He's telling a story. It's like David Lynch. Like, yeah, it's obscure and it's weird, but he is telling a specific story. You can interpret it however you want, but you adding things to tell a different story is not what he did. So
right. It might have been his intention. M. Night Shyamalan is a Catholic, and he did have the movie structured that way. I think for a reason where it fits in really nicely. So It may very well have been his intention. I think that's just a moment where you need a more literal explanation at some point, even if it's more hinted at, but something to key the viewers into it. But when I watch that movie, I watch it through something closer to that lens, right? So I see it with that assumption, and whether or not that's what he's intending it, that's how I'm seeing. I enjoy it.
No, I get that. I like watching Pulp Fiction with the idea that Marcellus Wallace's soul is in the briefcase. Mm-hmm. That's not really explicitly said in the movie.
Right.
There's things that lead me to believe it, but there's no proof that that's exactly what it is. But I like watching the movie through that lens.
Exactly. So it enhances your experience, whether or not it was intended or not.
Totally.
And as far as I know, Tarantino's denied that he said
has
he didn't have
it, but I don't believe him. He
No.
does. I think he does. I think he likes some of his own mystique a little bit.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I think he likes saying things about like his self or his process that kind of that add to the lore. You know, and I think it's kind of like him throwing us off the trail. Like he says, we've talked about this, but he says like that shot behind Marcellus Wallace's head where he's got the Band-Aid in the back of the thing. It's like, oh, he just had that Band-Aid that day. So we went with it. It couldn't be more highlighted. Like you're telling me that had nothing to do with the story, then that's like a red herring. I mean, it wasn't just something that you did. Like you are so meticulous.
You wouldn't think Tarantino, because he's meticulous, would allow that.
Yeah, as meticulous as they get. So he would just be like, oh, whatever. No, fuck you. It means something, or you're throwing us off the trail or something like that. Vero Juarez, who's watching along, is it too late to wish John Carpenter a happy birthday? Absolutely not.
Happy birthday, John Carpenter.
Happy birthday, John Carpenter. How do you feel about John Carpenter since that's coming up?
I really enjoy a lot of his work. I think I unfortunately was so late to John Carpenter. I didn't grow up loving horror as much as the next person. I was a very, very skittish and frightened child. So by the time I got around to really enjoying John Carpenter, I had been sort of desensitized by the horror that came after it. So a lot of it I know is derivative of John Carpenter, but it seemed like when I finally saw Halloween, I couldn't quite understand how it was as frightening a phenomenon as I had always heard that it was. And I really, really liked it. You know, it's masterful visual storytelling, and there are so many frames in there that you could pause and just appreciate. I also really like, he did do They Live, right?
Isn't that Cronenberg?
I don't think so.
Let me see here. I'm looking it up right now. And again, now you say that, I'm not sure. All right. What year was that?
Yeah. John Carpenter.
Oh, They Live, 1988. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was a staple of mine growing up.
Little China.
Big Trouble in Little China.
One of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, I like him a lot, especially when he's not leaning into horror. I never quite tracked with him through like his Lovecraftian style movies. The Thing is excellent if you would consider that Lovecraftian. I think that still holds up.
Which is that?
The Thing.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I like The Thing. The Thing could almost have like its own show. Like we could almost spend the whole time talking about The Thing.
I've never seen the sequel or the sequel prequel.
No, me neither.
But people say that it's nice so much. I love the Escape movies, Escape from New York and Escape from LA. Growing up, those were so I only have, those were like one of the first movies with like swearing in it my dad showed me. You know what I mean? So I have that like gravity associated with it. But I like once a week it pops into my head like, Snake Plissken, I thought you were dead, right? Or I thought he was dead.
Get that all the time. See, I don't get it. Like I watched it recently and like people talk about that film like it's one of the greatest things ever made. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like I don't get it.
It's like classy, cheesy fun to me. It's like the pinnacle of just like what the 80s thought the future would look like. Like to me, watching those movies back, he's just a certified badass. He's a cool character. It's got that kind of coolness factor to it. It's got a dystopia. I don't know, like all those kind of things piqued my interest at the time. I think you maybe have to have enjoyed it when you were 13 and grown up with it.
I guess so, because like I don't get the tone. Is it tongue in cheek or are they playing?
I think it's tongue in cheek. Absolutely, yeah.
I can't tell though.
I think it has humor. I think John Carpenter's very funny. I mean, I think there's a lot of humor in Big Trouble.
That movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like I saw that. I'd never seen it. This was maybe like 7-8 years ago.
Okay.
And I'd heard about this. Friends I knew growing up loved it, right? So I was like, oh, you know what? I never got around to seeing this. My friends used to quote it. All right. I smoked a little joint. Bro, I fucking fell in love with everything. Like just from the jump, when he's in the thing and he's like, when a 7-foot tall maniac takes you by the neck and puts you up against the wall and asks you, have you paid your dues? Yes, sir. The check is in the mail. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's like, what are you talking about? Who would ask you if you paid your dues? Like, what are you talking? Like, when would that ever come up? But his like confidence of that, like John Wayne kind of guy. It's so amazing, and like every moment plays out just so well. Like it's all in the reflexes. Like that is Kurt Russell.
I love Kurt Russell, and he's a real fun character to take into that sort of movie. Like he feels like he would be the sidekick in a movie like that, but it's from his perspective, and just like that sort of innovation. I like John Carpenter for. I also have really enjoyed John Carpenter as a personality. You can probably hear my son again. He's currently knocking on the door. But I like him as a personality. Every interview that I've seen,
a hack, Dad. I will not sit for this.
Too spooky for him. He's one. But I've always enjoyed hearing him talk about the process, and I like the amount of like the totality approach that he takes to his filmmaking, where he's doing the score, and he's often writing, if not doing rewrites. He's directing. He's got like a singular creative vision, and I think anytime that happens, if you don't have that exact like sorry for the bloody murder being yelled, that can hit or miss, just depending on whether or not that vision is like there's no like notes for broader appeal, or you have less room for that multiple perspectives. But when he hits for me, he really hits.
Well, he's one of the first, like, not one of the first, but I guess one of the first like modern like personality directors, where it's like there's like a persona around him. It's not just some guy you never see and you never hear about. Like he's, it's like Tarantino, where it's like he's as much part of the movie as the movie.
And a lot of those like cult of personality directors, when they get to that stage, I almost feel like they universally deserve it. Like almost every one of those directors who's famous for being a director, they're famous for good reason. I would say the first, I mean, maybe Charlie Chaplin. What's that?
I just can't think of one that doesn't fit the bill.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe some that you have like less of a personal preference for.
This is Snake is one of the few heroes that gets hurt and his plans always go bad. What do you think about that?
See if I can think of another. You would usually not like that in a movie. Usually that would destroy the sort of like, personal vehicle of the narrative, the power fantasy that you want to have in a sort of movie like that. But you're right, Vera Juarez. that is true. I don't know if that's one of the reasons why I like it, but that is a fun twist on that sort of like action trope that you don't normally see, that I think just embodies that sort of Carpenter walking a little bit sideways of what the audiences usually expect in those sort of movies. One of the reasons why I think Halloween was so successful was because you hadn't seen being frightened of what you didn't see so masterfully so often. One of the reasons why Jaws is so enduring, when that was supposed to be another creature feature elevated by a young Steven Spielberg. But yeah, so I a lot of those then become the tropes, which is why I think you have a real problem going back to them with new eyes or fresh eyes.
It's like watching stand-up comedy from like the 70s. It's like it feels like it's so stale, like it's been done 1,000 times. Like it is, but this was the first time.
It was cutting edge at the time.
Yeah.
Although what I didn't feel that way and what I expected to feel that way about was I went back and watched Citizen Kane for my first time, since I don't know, high school or something.
Since you were like a really educated, interesting film student.
Yeah. And I guess I assumed that it would have that sort of air to it, where it'd be like, this is a movie for film students, and there's a lot of movies of that era
can say that they're big fans of it and look cool.
Right. And I've never been like a huge fan of Casablanca. Like
me neither. I don't get it. I mean, I think it's fine. I don't get all the fucking praise.
Exactly. But I do think Citizen Kane holds up. I don't know the last time that you've seen it, but it is when I was absolute masterpiece.
Film student. That's when I saw
it. Well, watch it again, expecting not to like it. Like, like look for weaknesses in it. And like the first like 7 minutes is really, really dated in terms of storytelling. It opens with a montage of like newscasts about Kane's life. That comes off really kind of goofy and dated. But then every minute after that till the closing frame, there's not like an ounce of wasted script. Like every thing that you're seeing on screen and every line of dialogue not only like forwards the plot or reveals character, is engaging. Like every like fifth line of that movie could be like something you would tattoo on your body, and everybody would look at it and be like, "Huh," it still holds up. The wit is still like they have some of the best comedic edits I've ever seen. It's just absolutely like moves at a clipping pace that you wouldn't expect for a movie. Then
Comedic
the performance is
are
incredible.
so fundamental. Like they it's a really powerful tool when done right. Like just watch anything Edgar Wright's ever done. Like those comedic edit, they sing. They're just bing. They ring out so true.
Yeah, it has one of the best ones, and I would tell you what it is as a way to entice you to watch it again, because I think that it would, but I don't want to ruin it. It works so well.
Where did you watch it? Is it on
HBO Max?
HBO Max. Oh yeah, HBO Max got all the AMC stuff, right?
Yeah, they have all the Turner classics.
One of them, yeah, Turner Classic. Yeah.
But that is so worth a rewatch, especially. I mean, what I expected going into it was knowing that, like, okay, so Orson Welles kind of invented modern cinematography in this. He moved the camera in ways you don't expect. And there's a lot of really impressive camera shots that you do wonder, like, how did you pull that off?
I do remember the deep focus really being impressive. Like, even for someone who was a relative amateur at the time, like, I was just like, wow, that is like it's just a really deep shot, and it's like vivid, like, and everything being in focus, all like that. It's like, wow, that's pretty fucking impressive.
Yeah, camera choreography makes me wonder how you accomplish it back then. Certain like cross fading edits to make things look like there's a guy in a nursing home and behind him the story is going on, right? And you're wondering, like, there was no green screen like chroma key technology back then, trying to figure out how he would do it. You can kind of spot some of them because not all of them are as polished as others, but some of them are so seamless they look like they could have been done today, or the same techniques are done today. So I was going back, assuming I was going to be trying to appreciate it for what it brought.
Right. You're trying to keep an open mind. Like whenever I watch like Kurosawa, that's how I feel. I'm like, okay, I don't get this, but everyone says it's amazing. So let me keep an open mind and figure it out
and see what it is.
Yeah.
But Citizen Kane, in my opinion, stands absolutely on its like own legs now without the history. If you had never heard of it, you would still, I think, fall in love with that movie.
Wow, that's high praise.
And that's why I think like it is a candidate for best movie of all time, because how many movies can go 90 years or however long it's been, 85 years?
You know what? A lot of foreign films hold up. I mean, even though like they're silent, so you're kind of watching it like with the same way you go to a museum where you're like, oh, this is interesting. Like obviously, like if I'm home, I'm not just gonna pop on a Van Gogh and look at it. Right. You know what I mean? But like, so you kind of walk out with a little reverence. But like some of the Chaplin movies and the Buster Keaton movies they're fucking hilarious. Like they are laugh out loud, still funny. Some of the Looney Tunes, like some of the original, they are still hilarious and edgy.
Like, I remember. I've put on a couple of them because they're all on HBO Max now. They got all the Looney Tunes, and they hold up.
There was one where like the guy says he basically says fuck essentially, like where he's like they're trying to sneak in like two animals, I forgot, they're trying to steal like eggs or whatever, like a bird, and he says go get that bird or whatever, and he's like, oh, if the Hayes Commission something like that, I'd really give him the bird. And then he'd flip him off. Like that's amazing. Like what a cool joke. And that was in the 40s or whatever. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. No, they got away with a lot. They had to be very creative, to work around things like the Hayes Commission.
There's a great quote like that I can never remember, but I heard some filmmaker say it. I think it's a German quote, and he said it on some commentary. So I can never quite get it back, and I can't remember who said it or where it's from. I know I heard it. And it was just that a master shows his mastery like within his constraints. It's like people bitch and moan about the constraints. It's like they are there and you're right, but masters somehow get it through. And like that's when you show how good you really are, because you can do shit like in the face of like wokeness. You know what I mean? Like if you can still get stuff like through that like passes like the acceptable, censorship like tenor of the time, it's like, damn, you really are a badass.
Or even just something like Primer, where that guy had $6,000, and managed to make a movie that exists out here in terms of budget in what it's making you imagine with the time travel and everything and the engagement and how much of a return it gets for essentially having no like set pieces or anything like that. It's a sci-fi movie with no VFX, essentially no VFX, right?
And like one real camera shot, just like one like dolly shot in his driveway. And that's like essentially the most complex camera movement in the whole movie.
He gets a lot of bang for that. Or like
I think
maybe I haven't
it
seen it
works.
yet, but Arc being a single room, but you can get a lot out of one room. You
Yep.
really see how well a director can perform, I think, in those sorts of constraints.
Lock.
Mm-hmm.
Even though
Yeah.
it's essentially an experiment, but I mean, it's still like it works.
There's another movie, from what I understand. I don't know if you've seen it. I haven't, but with Rainn Wilson getting trapped in a well, and I
No.
think it's called "Don't Tell a Soul."
Mm-mm.
I think it dropped earlier this week. I just heard somebody talk about it in a way that kind of sold me on it. It was Kevin Smith who recommended it to his viewing audience, but he recommends just so much that I haven't enjoyed that I was hoping maybe he had a perspective on it. But it's from what I understand, like a buried thing where Rainn Wilson gets trapped in a well, but it executes twists and turns. And
I'm so hesitant to watch anything new. You know what I mean? Like I really wait to hear about it unless it's something I want to cover. You know what I mean? Like the new season of The Expanse, which I'm covering on my channel, which I think is excellent. It's so good. I know you don't watch the show, but it's just wow. It's really.
I'm happy it's paying off for you. I'll get through it eventually. I've got to push past like 5 episodes. I think I got through like 6 or 7 episodes, and then I started doing like my phone stuff, and I was like getting to the end of the season. I'm like, I'm lost now. So I'll go back eventually.
They drop the noir thing that you don't like. So that goes away. So it's like, that's more just like the first season and a half, maybe. But it's
I
like,
have to assume there's a lot there. If this is how you rave about it, you know,
it's just, I think it's one of the best written shows definitely out now. I don't know about ever, but it's up there for me. And it's by far my favorite science fiction show ever, like hands down. Like not even there's there's not even a number 2 compared to it. Like it's so good. But I also try to, like, when I'm reviewing it, I try to look outside myself, because I'm like, I love this genre subjectively, and there's like there's things in this that I just love so much as an individual. Like when the Rocinante's like miniguns are going, those PDC cannons are just lighting up torpedoes. I'm like, I get satisfaction out of that. Yeah. So it's like I subjectively enjoy this, but I still think objectively it's incredibly well written and well executed, and like all the departments are working so well in tandem with each other, like the costumes and the props and the sets. It's just so impressive. I just like, there's such a singular vision from the showrunner Naren Shankar, and like they keep it so consistent. I think I ruffled some feathers on my channel this last week though, because I didn't like the last episode, whatever, and I lost 2 subscribers, and like it's one of the lowest like watched like Expanse review videos I've had in a while, which makes me think people are just like dropping out of it, and so the algorithm isn't pushing it forward. But you know, it is what it is. I watched something that I'm hoping you've seen it, but it's from someone that you like, and I saw it kind of on a whim, and I turned out I really enjoyed it. It's by Gore Verbinski, who you've praised on this channel before. It was Johnny Depp's Rango.
Yeah, I love Rango.
Me
love
too.
Rango. That is an amazing movie.
Yeah.
And a great example of I guess elevating that sort of like animated animals genre, just like how seriously it took itself, to the point where you don't feel like you're watching. There's nothing about it as a kid's movie, aside from the fact that every other animated animal movie that you've seen has been a kid's movie. And maybe kids can watch it without being like terrified or learning too much like innuendo or anything like that.
It's pretty mature.
It's extremely mature. It's an adult plot told through like what is normally a children's framing for a story.
Yeah. I'll say, like, at first I wasn't into it, like, because of that prejudice of like, oh, this is about movies and people in movies, which so often is just masturbatory. It's not always. I mean, like, this is like All About Eve is a brilliant movie, and there's others movies that like are about the movie industry that are really good. But so I just like, I think I watched Nashville on your recommendation, and no, not Nashville. I mean, The Player.
The Player, yeah.
I just found it. I just lost interest. It wasn't bad. I just was.
I think caveat that with that being the sole reason that movie existed was self-congratulatory. I think I just thought it executed it well by being so aware of its self-congratulatory nature.
And I just have such a contentious relationship with like Hollywood people right now in my life. So I just don't like. I'm just like, I can't root for anyone in this. I'm not, you know, like it was everyone down to like the bitter writer, and it was the whole thing. I was just like, I don't.
Have you seen Get Shorty, the series? Ray Romano and Chris O'Dowd. It's fantastic, but it's set, you know, in film. Like the premise of that essentially is that like the mafia has to make a movie in order to settle a debt or something like that.
Right.
Um, and I've only seen the first season, which felt complete to me. And I watched a couple episodes of the second season. I was like, I don't need it. Not that I
Right.
wasn't enjoying it, but I didn't want to tarnish the first season at all. I didn't
Some
need
shows
more
don't
story.
need a second season. Like
Mhm.
really, like some shows just honestly don't. Like nothing's coming to mind, but I've seen that so many times. I almost sometimes some shows I don't even bother watching a second season because I'm like,
Well,
you know,
Servant just came out with a second season. I know you haven't seen Servant, but it's that M. Night Shyamalan show that was on Apple Plus.
Apple Plus, yeah. Which
And
I didn't watch Greyhound last night because apparently on my Roku that I have, it's not an updated Roku, so it can't have Apple Plus.
oh, really? That you have to get a new device or
Yeah.
software upgrade? Oh,
No,
wow.
no. You
Why would
have-
Apple do? Why would they want to price you out or like upgrade you out of spending your money for them?
I have
on them.
zero. I have no clue why. Like, I don't know. It's possible I searched wrong or whatever, but I feel like I put in Apple and like the first thing and the app wasn't there, and I looked it up and it says, "Oh, you might have too old of a device." I'm like, for what? How?
It's software.
It's software. Everything else seems to work. Like, why would
Netflix, Hulu, Amazon figured it out.
why would I need to buy a new Roku? Like, what? Why?
Yeah. There's a lot of good content on Apple TV,
And I
but-
want to check it out, but now the
Yeah.
only way I can watch it is on my computer, and my computer's in my like studio now, and it's like it's not comfortable for me to sit and watch
there
a
and
movie
watch it,
on
yeah.
it. I have to take it in the
your
other room.
phone, I guess, but I would imagine you wouldn't do that.
No, I wouldn't. But I wanted to go back to Rango just because I was
Yeah.
like I wanted to talk about it because I was so pleasantly surprised. And like at first I wasn't into it, like I said, because it had the Hollywood thing at first because he's an actor, right? And and I'm like, okay, like I'm not offended by this, but I'm definitely not in yet,
Mm,
And it was cool how that ended up really playing into the story.
exactly. I think it was a story decision, not because it happens to be a profession that's in the industry
Right.
telling the story. I
Yeah.
think the story requires him to have been an actor.
And it worked. It really worked.
What I appreciate about that movie is that every aspect of it is justified. It's not like set in that genre of being an animated animal movie just because it's like trying to like cash in on that craze or anything like that. But it's the way that the animation allows for the storytelling possibilities, the way that there are animals allows for the storytelling possibilities, that like you couldn't have just transferred that to people, where it doesn't just feel like an allegory, where it's just like, okay, well, that you could just have done a Western if that's what you wanted to do. The way that it leans into its own world so much, I just always appreciate. And I can fall in love with any world that I'm not necessarily into, because I'm sure like you, like myself, are not necessarily into like animated animal movies. I've never seen Watership Down, which I assume does the same thing.
I
But
saw the Netflix series of it, which was interesting, but it's 100% allegory. I mean, it was fine. It was interesting. I didn't dislike it at all. I mean, what isn't it about communism or something?
I haven't
Or
seen
like
it.
the Nazis or something? I don't know what it's anyway. Like it's supposed to be an allegory for like oppression or societies. I don't know. It was fine. It was good. I mean, it was there's nothing wrong with it, but I just didn't expect like. I really like the story kind of crept up on me with Rango because for like the first like 15 minutes, like he's really not making a single decision and things are just happening to him. And I'm like, there's really not a character here right now. Like this is he's just enduring calamity after calamity. And I'm like, okay, like I need my character to be a character at some point.
Right.
But then once he does interact with his own story, it becomes so interesting. Like, and it was like it played like where it was going so well. Like you knew where it was going to go. Like you knew eventually there's going to be a come to Jesus moment where he had to face the fact that he's like, this ruse is happening.
He's going to have to step into the boots that he, faked his way into for
and
real.
Everyone's going to know he's a fraud. Like you knew that was coming. And I just when it paid off, I was just like, wow, that worked.
Yeah.
And, like they really made him, they really needled him. Admit you're a fraud. It was great.
Where it felt like believable. It didn't feel like this is the point in the movie, but the culmination of the characters, like when they would actually find out, it felt real in the moment.
Yeah, or it didn't soften it. Like a lot of times, like they'll kind of touch on that moment, but it'll kind of bounce off. It won't really go there. It really went there.
Yeah.
And
The opposite of how you were feeling about Time Trap or whatever it was.
Time Trap, yeah. I'd like for you to see that. I wouldn't even know where you could watch it, but I'd like to just see if like what you thought of it. But I guess you got the impression of all the ideas, so you don't really need to see it. But
yeah, I'm actually interested in it. I know that I'm probably not going to enjoy it, but the story sounds so interesting. I do kind of want to see it.
There's a lot of, like I said, a lot of great ideas, which is what I like thought was like it's why it compelled me to continue watching it, but like with an immense amount of fury at how poor these characters were behaving.
I always like any sort of movie that can take an idea you've seen 1,000 times and just barely twist it, but enough to give it its own spin. Like I loved, I just saw that movie Freaky, Vince Vaughn.
Yeah. Oh, is that good?
So is it objectively good? I don't know. And I also don't feel equipped to be objective in it, but it's so much fun. I would say if anybody liked Happy Death Day, they would like Freaky. It's got the same sort of like comedy horror vibe that does not it leads more into comedy than horror, but lives in like a horror tone, but never actually pays off like the horror elements of it where you're not going to actually feel tension or fear. But it's a body swap movie that you've seen in something like The Hot Chick, where it's, a girl and an adult man, but it's a serial killer who's the adult man. So now you've got a serial killer in a, the popular high school chick's body and the inverse there. And to me, every like joke paid off pretty much. It doesn't like reach the height of the potential that you hoped it would, but It's all the elements of movies that I've seen growing up. I've seen all those like body swap movies. You've seen all those slasher movies. You know, you've seen all those like high school click movies. You've seen the like cat and mouse, like gotta find the bad guy movies, just blended into one in a way you haven't seen before. And it didn't suck. And it is pretty funny. I think a lot of the jokes do land. I was just thoroughly entertained.
I'm glad it's a comedy because the concept makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it doesn't do too much to dissuade your discomfort. It's kind of like how Wonder Woman 84 had I don't know if you saw it. But it had Steve Rogers.
But
a character takes over like an innocent body. Okay, I'm sure everybody knows.
Yeah,
and then they just don't reference it. They're just not going to deal with any of the implications of that.
Oh no, they do. At the end, she flirts with him.
I know. But in terms of just like they don't care that they put that guy's life in danger by using his body.
With the morality of it or the fact
they used his body for sex or whatever.
Yeah, like
they go for the jokes in that sort of movie in the same way that The Hot Chick did, but just updated a little bit from modern sensibilities. So yeah, I can see why it would make you uncomfortable, but they skim on the top of it enough that but they're definitely like so this is what having a penis is like. And then he already is kind of like a pervert, so he immediately uses his sex appeal to kill people. He like leans into the idea of like it would be very easy for
so uncomfortable because serial killers is so sexual, and it's also so much about women. And it's like, just now that he's in it just really grosses me out. Like, I'm just like, oh, I don't really want to.
It's not unaware of it. And I think, but it handles it, I mean, obviously through a comedic slant, but something akin to what would really happen if that situation occurred. Like how I think a real serial killer would handle waking up in that body. And that's what's kind of interesting about it to me, where maybe it doesn't, I don't know, maybe it's an irresponsible movie to some degree.
I'm just from the idea alone, I'm just like,
if you have the opportunity to watch it for free, I paid $20 to see it on like the early release thing, but I still like the movie, which I feel like that's a high threshold to still like the movie for. If you're spending $20, it better be worth it.
That reminded me just when you said the $20, because I remember it came out over, this past year, and now it's on HBO Max, I think, is with the King of Staten Island.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see it?
I saw it. Mm-hmm.
Did you like it?
No, I'm not enough to recommend it. You really like the lead actor in it. What's his name?
I don't know if I really like him.
Oh, okay.
I had an interaction with him, and he was really cool. He's a comedian, but he kind of like now he sort of exists in a way that like I want to say like Kevin Hart, but comics that are just too big now, where it's like I don't
their talent.
Not even that. Just they're not like they don't exist like comedians anymore. Like the comedians I like, like they make fun of each other and they pick each other apart and like not nothing's off limits, but like I've heard that like Pete Davidson, like you can't make fun of like him and Ariana Grande. And it's like,
yeah, I believe that. I've never been a huge fan of his comedy,
but I can't make fun of the most high profile part of your life. Like
right.
you want to not touch that. Like, dude, you know, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like you're like this successful. You bang like this one of these hottest chicks in the world, and like I can't talk about it now because
right.
like eat it. Dude.
Too sensitive about it.
Yeah, man. Fuck you. It's not like she died.
His movie, though, like to me, felt like anybody's first screenplay, and it might have been where it was too bloated and it was too committed to the idea of like this was so tragic and heavy to me when I lived it. You're going to be just as invested. It's going to feel just as emotionally devastating to you. And I just didn't care. A lot of it just felt like low stakes and like, I don't know, grow up. It was like 2.5 hours, like those Apatow movies usually are.
Yeah.
And it just, every moment in it to me felt unearned.
Well, you know, his
just
dad died in 9/11, right?
Yeah. And that's what the movie's about.
Right. So it's about that. It's not really about that. Yeah. So, but
no, I mean, it's literally about it, about his dad, about him dealing with the fact that his dad died in 9/11 and his mom is now dating a firefighter.
Right. And that's Bill Burr, right? I heard he did a great job.
He does. Yeah. He's a great, I like him as an actor. I really do. And he does a great job in it, more than you would expect him to. He's still Bill Burr. Like, it's not like he's really acting, but he's solid. But he's a solid Bill Burr character.
I want to take a moment. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the great Eric K. Hello, good sir. I don't know if you know Jared, but Eric K. is a moderator over at Nerdrotic, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels, and is pretty much the reason I have an audience because it's such a cool community and people hang out from there and like come check me out. And Eric K. is the man. We hung out in Vegas, and I also agree with his sentiment here. Smash that thumbs up to show your Foulball love. I concur. And he says. I watched a Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor movie the other day, Silver Streak. Those two played well off each other and made fun of each other. Yeah, it was supposed to be Richard Pryor in Blazing Saddles, actually, because of that dynamic. And he's like, it's like one of the people that knew him the best or something like that. Like Gene Wilder and him, I believe, had a very special connection. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I know that they were in a few movies together. I think See No Evil or Hear No Evil or one of those.
Yeah.
I remember that. Was he not in Blazing Saddles? Richard Pryor wasn't in Blazing Saddles. He was, right?
No, it's the other guy. It's what's his fucking name?
Well, I feel terrible for getting that wrong. But if you had asked me,
it makes sense because it was supposed to be him. So it's like you almost got he might have even been playing a version of him in his head. You know what I mean? No, it's I forget his name because he didn't really go on to be that big of a
Cleavon Little.
That's his name. Because he didn't go on to have like a huge career. But it's such an iconic movie and it's such an iconic role. But I guess like
it feels made for Richard Pryor.
I believe
if you had asked me 5 minutes ago who was in Blazing Saddles, I would have told you Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder.
Like you'd almost think that it was, but it just because it's like that's who that guy, like that's the guy you think of, you know what I mean? Like from that era. Kind of like how Chris Tucker was like the guy for a while, and you think about like, whenever it's like it's Chris Tucker, but it's not. Oh, okay. But yeah, I guess I don't know much about Pryor. I know what I've heard people talk about him. Like Jim Norton, I listen to constantly, and he, I guess apparently Pryor was very difficult to work with, like later on in his career. So I think that may have blackballed him in Hollywood, and that's like probably why he didn't end up working on these movies. I'm not really sure, but that's what I understand.
There's an excellent story about him. I certainly don't know more about Richard Pryor than you do.
Got into drugs.
That I do know.
Yeah, that's what I. That's
Mungo.
what I heard. Wrote the part for Mungo. I don't know what Mungo is. Oh, that's the big dude. Oh, like Mungo candy. Mungo like candy. Candygram for Mungo. Candygram for Mungo.
Wait, so what happened? So Richard Pryor wrote that part into the script?
Probably. Like I imagine him and Mel Brooks were friends, something like that. You know what I mean? Because Mel Brooks is such a force in comedy, and like so is Pryor. So I could see them like rubbing elbows and being buddies.
There's that documentary on the Comedy Store that's either on Showtime or Stars. I forget which one. Have you seen it?
No.
Showtime. I do recommend that. There's a couple of amazing firsthand accounts of Richard Pryor that get into a little bit of like the darker side, but tell a lot about like why he was beloved in the early days and when he was working out his material there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. And I haven't seen too many documentaries on him. I know a lot of the pop culture stuff about like what he was into and like some of those big urban legend stories and things, but like
Sure.
nothing intimate. Oh, but
so go ahead.
Well, I was going to change the subject a little bit. So
well, then real quick before we do that, I was just for me personally, like I can't get into them because it's too much time is removed, and like so many people imitated him throughout the years that it's like, even though knowing that this is the originator of it, it's like I've heard this a million times. But I do know that he was like the first, so it's hard to understand it. And I've tried to watch his stuff, and I'm like, I don't respond to this. Like I want to, but I just don't. But
I'm the same way, and I don't even necessarily think I put in the effort.
Yeah. This is exactly what I was saying. Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor were in many movies together, and yes, they were friends. He was supposed to play Bart in Blazing Saddles, but this studio did not want him. Yes. So what was the topic you were going to bring up?
Just kind of parallel to it, Jim Belushi is a similar figure that like I also didn't know a whole lot about and never got too into his stuff. I mean, I'd seen a lot of his big movies and Animal House.
Jim or John Belushi?
Did I say Jim Belushi?
Yeah.
I meant John Belushi.
John Belushi, okay.
And, I've seen a lot of his like classic SNL stuff and things like that. And, the Blues Brothers and stuff I like growing up. But like, I was never as big of a John Belushi fan as like the average person who was really into comedy. But I did just watch the Belushi documentary that was, I think, on HBO. Okay. Really, really well made documentary, regardless of whether or not you're a big fan or like his work. But it's all threaded together. He kept letters to like the love of his life, who he started writing to at like 12 or 13 when they met, and kept writing up until he was like certain that he was going to die of a drug overdose, where he was writing about how he didn't have power over the drugs anymore, and like the summer that he was clean and all sorts of things. Wow. So the narrative framing device are these letters throughout his life history, and then you have all the other people who worked with him and knew him well coming in to tell stories off of that. Like it's almost as if like these letters were read to these people, and then they were asked about that time in his life, and they're filling in the blanks and stuff. And then a lot of like photos and videos that you probably haven't seen before. Really worth it, regardless of your opinions on John Belushi. Really well made documentary.
That's really
exactly.
No, I just say that's really interesting because I think there's a Chris Farley documentary out there right now too.
Yeah, that I have not seen, but I would lump him into that same category too, where it was just like not quite my style of comedy. Yeah, like bombastic physical stuff, I was never hugely into.
I don't get it, but I get that people like it, so that's interesting. It's fun. Yeah. I watch Farley now. It's kind of the way I watch Nirvana. Like I was never a big Nirvana fan, but like now when I hear it, it's kind of like I appreciate it, like some sort of nostalgia or like something of the time. Same thing when I see like Farley, it's the same thing. Like I kind of like appreciate it more now in retrospect, and I'm like, he is funny, dude. Like his commitment to his choices is astounding.
Yeah, and I would never try to say anything to the contrary. But like in terms of what makes me laugh,
and I never got it. I never like especially when I was a kid. Like when I never like everybody liked those movies, and I wanted to like them because all the kids liked it, and I just didn't. And I was like, I must be me. There must be something wrong with me because I don't get this. Like, what is the funny part about this?
That's what I like about those sorts of documentaries, is that I actually feel like I can appreciate them for a minute, like as the fans did, like through that lens, because I'm not just watching their material, which I didn't connect with, but I get to connect from the perspective of the fans and the personal life. So it gives me like a nice window into, I like watching documentaries about people that I'm not necessarily an obsessive fan of for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, I documentaries to me have almost become kind of like reading, where I idealize my consumption of it, and I'm like, I should and I will, and I just don't.
And I make for great nighttime viewing, in my opinion, like where you don't necessarily know if you want to commit to like following a story. You can drift in and out if you need to, or like maybe you had a couple things you wanted to check on your phone, you toss it on. But then if it captures you, and you can allow it to do that, like no pressure. I've been watching tons of documentaries just like once the house is quiet and I'm maybe going to get other things done, but like I'll allow myself to get drawn in.
I like some that because I struggle, like we've talked about this. I struggle finding stuff to watch a lot recently. Like I went on a run where I watched a bunch of movies I've already seen, and it was really fun. Like I watched Goodfellas, and I watched Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and Catch Me If You Can. And That was a ball, man. I had so much fun watching those movies. Kind of like recaptured that like, passion of watching great movies.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because I'd still sometimes I'm just like, I just want to sit down and watch something, and I don't want to have to spend 25 minutes debating. And okay, I have 2 B- in my head, like of interest, and I'm juggling between the two, and I just put on a podcast and
Right.
put Jack on my phone.
Or something that you've seen before. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, or something that I've seen before.
Have you seen Soul?
No, I haven't, because sorry, I'll get into that. Eric A said, have you seen John Belushi in The Continental Divide? I think it's called. Was so unlike his other movies. Have you ever heard of that?
Well, it was touched on in the documentary. I hadn't heard of it before, but it seemed like Belushi kind of resented the character that he was being portrayed as, that he was like the American tastemaker, and he wanted to do something that reflected his own tastes a little bit more. And by all accounts, he loved the movie, and from what I understood, he tried to take a lot of creative control over of the movie while it was in production. So a lot more of that was his vision, but it was panned, and people felt betrayed by him for making that movie off the heels of Animal House. That it was a little bit more serious. I don't know if it was just a different style of comedy or if it was a drama.
It's hard to control your image.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to control the image that like people have of you and like trying to fight it. It's like, I don't know how to ride that. Like I've obviously never been in that position, but it's like, sometimes it's like, it almost comes across like they resent what's making them interesting. And it's like, well, we like you for this. Like,
Right.
It's almost like it's like as an artist, like you need to have like stages in your career or in your, in what you do. It's like right now you're the crazy party guy. Just lean into it for now. And then you can go into the next stage of exploring artistic expression. But I guess I could also see not wanting to be pigeonholed into something that you don't even really enjoy, Like,
Yeah.
So I've heard Bobcat Goldthwait said that, like he resented being that character so much because it was something that was just, that's what it was. And that's what everyone knew him as. And he just almost like hated it.
And I can understand that being a lot of fun when you're in your 20s and maybe you're doing a little more drugs and you're like trying to stand out. But then to keep that sort of energy up as you're aging and, as your tastes are changing. But he did the smart thing, which is he went into filmmaking and he went into writing. He didn't try to keep doing stand-up out of character. He did once. He recently released a special that was out of character.
Who is this? Oh, Bobcat?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I
like,
did.
To me, that was smart. He reinvented his image with another wheelhouse entirely.
You're right. It's like, I remember when I first heard he was a director, I was like, wait, that guy with the crazy voice, he's like a director? Like,
right.
The guy from the Police Academy movies, that guy, right? It's like, yeah, he did. I mean, he's done some movies that people really love. I think he's a taste type of director. I think like you either have his taste or you don't. But he did that movie Shakes the Clown that people really appreciate. But the one that he did that I fucking loved was World's Best Dad or World's
Greatest Dad, Robin Williams. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was his directorial debut, if I'm not mistaken. No, maybe Shakes was. But that was him coming on the scene, at least for me, was with World's Greatest Dad.
And
I love that movie. I think I watched it like twice in a row, like back like the next day after I saw it the first time.
Me too. I think I did too. Like it had such a profound impact on me. Let me see his director. Yeah, Shakes the Clown was 91.
Okay, so World's Greatest Dad was significantly after that.
And then he did a lot of TV. So he did The Man Show, Chappelle Show, Jimmy Kimmel. He did like all of Jimmy Kimmel Live when he was on, and then World's Greatest Dad was in 08.
World's Greatest Dad was like the first time, and I'm sure it's not the first time it was done, but it was like one of the first times that I had seen, and that would make sense. I'm just about 18 there, and 2008. So if I'm just starting to get into those like headier, I might not have seen the full caveat of films that you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah,
where the character did what I actually in the human experience would expect somebody to do, but was like too dark that you would ever think that you would be seeing it portrayed, for him to like try to exploit his son's suicide, right? And
I loved it.
I can understand that happening in real life, but I also can never imagine somebody telling that story. And I was just so blown away by that was the direction it went, and I believed it.
Yeah,
that's so different from the way that you've seen that story shake out before.
So, and the way it progressed, like if someone described it to you, you'd be like, ugh. But the way it happened was so done out of love. Like and like that he was just such like a cucked man that he just didn't have like any strength to stand up to anyone in his life. Like his girlfriend clearly cheating on him, and like his son who just bitches him around even though he tried. And you'd see him like try to stand up for himself once in a while, but then that just like, and the fact that he's the failed writer, you know, and then like getting all that praise, like just that vanity that like that got tapped into. It was like,
see exactly how he'd end up in that position.
And it wasn't gross. Like it didn't turn me off in a way where I was like, ew. Like I was like, ew, but like I kind of like I enjoyed watching the journey, and he had like this dirty secret. And then the fact that like his best, like the kid's friend was like, that's not, I know him. I know that's not how he was. And it's like, in that kind of like that telltale heart, you know, like the raven, like, you know, just like squawking the truth and him just not wanting to look at it.
And I usually despise those types of movies where they're like a ticking time bomb into cringing, you know, that like sort of you just feel it coming, and where just like things keep getting piled on to your protagonist. I hate that sort of
the same way, to be honest. I had like a similar mechanic. I mean, essentially your countdown to cringe is a similar. Yeah, but go on.
Like the Kafka-esque style storytelling where things just keep going wrong and you find yourself deeper and deeper. I hate that. I want to see characters pulling themselves forward and not constantly being backed into corners.
Yeah.
But
like
it's just
man. Or no, is that A Serious Man?
A Serious Man is probably what you're thinking of, the Coen brothers.
Yeah.
My Siri just went off. What can I help with you? It's the same series. Yeah, normally that's not my style of movie, but it was so well executed. It's just a nice little tightrope walk where it's like you're invested in the character. You kind of pity him, but like you're rooting for him in the same way. You don't want that moment to happen. You know it needs to happen.
And it was honestly, but the brilliance of it was the best thing that could have happened to him. It wasn't a loss. It was like, it was a metamorphosis. It was like the butterfly coming out of the cocoon. Like it was like, now he can really step into who he is finally. And he can really own himself and live into what's real truth and not the niceties. Like he could be his own man. It was beautiful.
That's like one of those stories that I so foreign for me to understand how you as a content creator, so as a writer, come up with that story. But then when you watch it, you're like, yeah, no, of course that story like falls into place that way. I can see how you got there, but I can't understand how he comes up with it out of nothing. That it's like that to me is what like the pinnacle of like a writer director is, where you have that singular vision that you can tell, and you're coming out with such a unique take. Like I don't think anybody else, like he could have sat on that script for 15 years and no one's going to have something that would make it derivative, you know? But yet once you see it, it feels obvious.
Obvious? I don't know if obvious is the word I'd pick, because it's just to think about that idea is so macabre.
Right.
And like, and we're gonna watch a story where, like, you know what I mean, where that's what it's about. Like, geez.
Well, I mean, like once it's happening, you go like, yeah, no, I can definitely, like, no part of you thinks it's coming out of left field.
No.
I guess like it surprises you, but it makes such sense in the world where it's just like, of course, this is like a point A to point B with this character, how he would react in the situation, like how you've set this world up. But to have created that wholesale from whole cloth, like, yeah, that to me was masterful. And he hasn't followed that up with anything that I've loved to that level. I enjoyed God Bless America, and I enjoyed that Willow Creek, that like Bigfoot Jaws movie.
Didn't see either one,
but they don't rise to that level. I don't think he's had another like standout. He had one recently, but I didn't see it. I don't remember what it was.
I remember seeing his hearing about it. Like I saw like his press tour or something like that. He does a lot of it seems like he does a lot. Oh, he did the Misfits and Monsters. Is that what I'm thinking of? It's like a TV show or something like that. It was an interesting concept, but he like, I'm looking at his IMDb, he does a lot of stand-up specials. Like he directs a lot of stand-up specials. Like I
see his name pop up as a director all the time.
Like he did 14 episodes of Maron's show, but he did his special more later. He did Eliza Schlesinger's, he did Patton Oswalt's, and he did Ron's Funches recently. There's a lot of heavy hitters in comedy that he directed specials. God Bless America. That, I don't know. Like I remember like hearing about it. I saw like the trailer. It just looked is gimmicky the word? I don't know. It just kind of felt like, remember Red State?
Yeah, I liked Red State. I know I probably liked it more than you did.
Ugh,
I like Kevin Smith. I like Tusk. So
I know I respect that shit. Well, Tusk I would never watch because I don't like horror and I don't like body horror. But
Mhm.
like I don't want to. I don't, what I always like with stuff like that, like I found myself one day just going through all like horror movie deaths on YouTube. Like I want to see the disgusting ideas that you have, but I don't want to sit through a 2 hour
Right.
journey to get there. Like I'm like I just want to have like what's that movie? Slither, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And like she's all bloated. And
James Gunn movie.
I guess I don't know, but it's just like I like that idea of like the disgusting stuff is interesting, but I don't want to watch the whole movie. I just want to see that disgusting thing and then move on because it's a lot.
Red State, I think the only issue with that movie is that it was clearly written building towards a punchline that he wasn't able to film, and I think that the movie would have been infinitely better and like more of a pop culture like staple that would have been more embedded in the pop culture if he was able to carry out the ending to that script, which he ended up having to just cut abruptly to the court case, them talking about. I don't know how well you remember it.
I just remember what rubbed me the wrong way about the movie was like that pastor, like I feel like somewhere deep in Kevin Smith's soul, he believes that what he was saying. Like I think it goes back to his old Catholic background or something. There was something too like, ooh, like it just was like, ooh, it gave me
felt
like
too real.
Yeah.
Well, I think he copied and pasted a lot of it from the Westboro Baptist Church.
Maybe
so I think a lot of that was just based on that. That was the inspiration for the character, and then a lot of the third act was Waco.
Yeah, I just I don't know. I've departed from Kevin Smith, like, and I respect that you like him. I just don't connect with him anymore.
I'm gonna watch the hell out of Clerks 3 and Mallrats 2, and Mallrats is my least favorite of his movies. I'm not counting Yoga Hosers because I don't think anybody should. But
that's funny. Eric K says that earthquake just hit Argentina.
Oh,
one. Oof.
Geez, populated area.
I don't know.
I would imagine so. If it's coming in this way, I imagine it was devastating.
San Juan province. I don't know anything about Argentina. No tsunami warning issued. Series of aftershocks. I hear there's no damage report in the article I'm reading right now.
Might be too early, I guess, if it's hit over the course while we're talking.
It says about an hour ago is the first no reports of injuries. Okay.
Yeah, but it might be too early to start totaling that.
Yeah, man. Fucking earthquakes are crazy. Like living through earthquakes out here are nuts.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed them when I first moved out here. They were so novel. I used to come out here
they totally are. That's funny. They are.
I spent summers out here. I mean, not like every summer, but like my dad's parents are from out here. I was from Pennsylvania, but I would come out here and spend some time with them over the summers. And I always wanted to experience an earthquake. And my, entire childhood, I kept hoping like the next time I went, I would feel one. And I never did. So like the first few that I had out here, I was like, oh, this is like really neat, And then you start to live through the ones where you could see like where they could be very, very frightening. Like where that
there was one a few years back that was like 2 in a row. And the first one, I remember like the first one that happened, I was like, oh, that was kind of interesting. And then the second one happened, like then I got really scared. I was like, this could get real. And I really started to freak out because my cat, like, you know how they say animals have like that sixth sense about fucking not my cat. He's looking around like, what the fuck's going on? What is all this? I'm like, well, so I was hoping you could tell me, but I
know my cat was the same way.
It's like, I don't know. And then the worst part though was then he ran into the bedroom and hid under the bed. And I'm like, this is how pets die in fires. Because they hide and then the fucking thing burns down and you never get them out and they die.
Right. You can't get to them.
And he couldn't get to him. And I was like, that really freaked me out and made me really anxious. I was like, oh shit. Like, cause I'm like, I know I won't be able to get him out. Like, I know he won't come out. Like he's not going to come out from under the bed if he doesn't want to. And if like the fucking house is shaking apart, like, oh God. And it was intense. Like across the street from me is an apartment complex with a pool. And the pool, like the water just like all over swashed out.
Yeah. No, they're bizarre because there's so many different types. You have ones that kind of just feel like little explosions, and then you get the
this is Eric.
Right.
They get them all the time in California. 6.4 wouldn't even get them out of bed.
That would wake us up.
Freak out. So now listen, I've seen the news footage of the highways collapsing and stuff like that. People die in these things. It's nothing to shake a stick at, Eric. But
they're surreal. If you haven't lived through them and you expect it to be shaking, but then you can feel like it feels like you're on the ocean or something for a bit.
It's weird.
They're surreal. They're way different than you would expect.
Yes, it's living. Because you think like what's the fucking difference? Like what's so scary about that? It's like because the fucking earth, your whole world is shaking. Like it's not just, it's
you don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know how that's gonna play out. Is it gonna get worse?
Yep. Yeah.
Where the crack's gonna form?
Yeah, I'm like, how good is the foundation of this house I live in? You know what I mean? Like, is this like built for earthquakes, or did they skimp on this one? Like now I don't know, We're approaching 2 hours, my friend. You wanna wrap it up?
Yeah, sure.
Like as always, we could go for another 4, but I'm sorry. I gotta eat.
I'm sure I have a baby to put to bed.
And you got a baby to put to bed. Do you want to? Is your film available yet?
It is not, but hopefully within the next 6 or so months. We had a couple of things that we were waiting for. We're waiting on a few festival results before we decide if it's going to just go up on Amazon Prime or anything. But they'll come back and I'll plug it then.
Okay, cool. I mean, yeah, keep an eye out for the film. It's the Great and Terrible Day of the Lord that Jared co-wrote and co-directed with his best buddy Clark.
Solely wrote, co-directed.
Oh, really? You wrote it by yourself? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's so your vision. Like, why would? Yeah. It's a really unique take. Talk about writer director vision. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't imagine anyone else writing this movie. Like, and it's the same thing you just said about Bobcat. Like, if you sat on it for 15 years, and it could never be duplicated. It's so your own voice.
I hope not, because hopefully we don't have to sit on it for 15 years, but it keeps getting delayed.
I don't know. Well, it's finished. I mean, it'll get out eventually. But keep an eye out for it, guys. It's a hell of a film, and Jared's a hell of a filmmaker.
Thank you, man.
A film. Your friend filmed. You were talking about. Yes, that's correct. That is correct. Yes. So thanks for watching. If you guys haven't pressed like, please do so. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and comment if you liked it. Comment if you like the topics. Is there anything you want us to cover? I think this show is really fun, and my channel is starting to gain a little traction. So it's we can have a little more fan interaction, kind of talk about topics, or maybe have a concept show, whatever. Stuff moving along. So thank you guys for watching. And Jared, as always, thanks for joining me, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime, man. All right. Thank you guys. Have a great night. See y'all soon. Eric K. Hail the great Eric K. Thank you, Vero Juarez, for hanging out with us. Guys, have a great night. Toodles.